going to start with the B. And I think, look here, I've got B, 2B, 3B, 4B, 6B, 7B, 8, 9, and 12B. So I'm going to keep the 12 and I'm going to keep the B. And then I'm going to look at some intervals in between. So I think I'll take the 2B out, 3B, and 6B, just to make it simpler, and 9B and 12B. And I'm going to try a progression with these. The first thing I want to point out is that I've got a pencil sharpener here and I have no eraser. I'm not going to use an eraser here because this is a practice sheet, it's a drill. And we're not going to be rubbing out, this is all going to be additive. I'm not going to be smudging or blending with an eraser or a paper stick or my fingers. So I'm going to have clean hands. And sometimes it's useful to tape the paper down. I haven't at the moment. Now the other thing I'm going to show you is that these pencils are all well sharpened, and I've sharpened them not because I'm going to use the tip. I'm not going to be drawing like this, because that, as you can see, produces lines. As I've shown in some other videos, I'm going to hold my pencil like this, which means that I am drawing with the side of the pencil. Okay, and this is much easier for two reasons. It's much easier to blend and to avoid streaky tones. But the second thing, it's much easier to get very, very delicate shades as well. So you can apply the minimum pressure and still get a good soft tone rather than streaky effects. The other thing that I'm going to point out is that I'm working with one sheet of paper directly on a hard surface. Now the reason I'm doing this is because when you've got a hard surface under your piece of paper, you don't need to press as firmly to get very dark tones. So the paper is more sensitive if it's got a hard surface underneath it to the pressure that you apply. Now if you've got a soft surface underneath, you have to press much harder to get very, very dark tones, and then the risk you run is that you're going to dent the paper, and that will create problems for you. So the idea is I'm going to try and create a tonal progression from very, very light here at this end to very, very dark at this end. And I'm going to make my pencil strokes around about this long because it gives me most control and sensitivity. Too long, it gets streaky. And too short, the pencil stroke's too short, and I don't get as much control. Now if we imagine it starting very, very pale here and going to dark here, I want a gradual progression. So I want a progression that is a little bit like as if it's a gradual sliding up in density from very thin here to very, very dense here at this end. I don't want a swoop. I don't want it all the same tone here and then suddenly getting darker. Nor do I want a swoop going this way where I have very, very short soft tones and then a lot of dark tones. Also, I don't want sudden jumps, and I don't want it to be out of sequence. So it needs to be almost like a straight line, a gradual progression. And that is the reason we're doing the drill, because that is one of the most difficult things to achieve. And I'm going to be honest with you, this drill, this shading drill of getting pale to dark, this shading drill is probably the toughest exercise you'll do. And it's worthwhile doing it over and over again until you're really confident and flexible with it, and until you can really have control over it and not have your tones come out accidentally. The more you do this, the more it will influence the quality of every drawing you do. Even when you're using line, you want to be able to produce sensitivities of tone with your line and understand what changes in pressure do when you're using your pencil. So to be in control of that. So with line drawing, color shading, charcoal drawing, even pastel drawing will benefit from this drill that you're going to do with graphite pencils. So let's get started. Now I chose this selection of pencils because it's going to be easier for me to produce the very, very soft tones with the B and the 3B pencils, and much easier for me to produce the very dark tones with the 9B and the 12B. And I'm going to start at this end with the softest, most delicate tones, and then I'm going to gradually layer and layer until I get very, very dark tones at this end. So I'm going to start with the B pencil, and I'll just put these ones aside. And remember that I'm holding my pencil like this. And I'm going to change the direction of my pencil lines or pencil strokes slightly as I go. So I'm going to start here, and this already is not white. See that I'm just producing, when you do the first one, and you start at that end, just start producing what you think is the lightest tone you can do. Notice already that this is quite dark at the beginning, isn't it? So then I might say, well, I'm going to start again because I really want to get as light as possible, as light as I can, and using the B. Now, you might think, maybe if I use the HB I can do this, but the HB produces a different quality of graphite mark. It's a slightly different color, should I say. It's a slightly more silvery black. And so it's best to just stick with the B pencils and get the control. So how can I get less pressure than this? Well, what I'm going to do is actually rest these fingers on the paper while I'm resting the tip here. And I'm going to, in a way, be using these as a brake on the pressure that I apply. And I'm going to make this pencil try and just touch it as if it's creating a spider's web. And here I'm going to go in slightly circular motions because this produces even less pressure than going backwards and forwards. Now you can see I've done 3 layers here. 3 layers to get that. That's very, very pale. And I'm going to keep going because that's okay for a start. That's quite good. So then I want to keep going, and notice that I'm not pressing harder. Not yet. What I'm doing is I'm just going backwards and forwards, and now I'm starting to weave them together by going in slightly different directions. Notice by using the same pressure all the time, but just going over and over, I'm layering it. So you can already see that this area here is darker than that area, and it's simply because it has more layers of the same pencil. That is the sort of control we want. Now, of course, when we finish over here, this area is going to be much darker by the time we've finished, but this is a good start. Start lighter. Remember, we're not using an eraser, and I'm not going to blend with my finger or thumb. So we always are thinking, I'm going to add more till I get the right tone. I can't take it away. If it's on the paper, I can't remove it. And if there's too much in certain places, when you get to the end of this drill, then of course I need to do it again. I start again. So I'm very, very delicately layering this. And I'm still using the B pencil. Backwards and forwards and layering. Notice too that I'm getting the texture of the paper. Now this is perfectly all right. I don't want to eliminate the texture of the paper. This is why we use good art paper, because the texture, or the technical term for it is the tooth of the paper, creates a depth to your tones and your colors. So never press so hard that you really get rid of it, that you dent the paper and flatten it. Okay, so there we go. That's the beginning. Notice I've got a little bit of a streaky thing here. That's going to end up disappearing because that area will be darker. Before I go any further, look at how long my scale from light to dark is going to be. It's around about the same length as a pencil. Look at how wide it is. This is around about 1 inch or 2 centimeters wide. So to be fair, because I said this is such a difficult exercise, I'm suggesting if you do your scale about this size, it's much easier to learn how to control it. Then it gives you flexibility later when you've got more and more skill. It gives you the flexibility to grow the area of shading that you're doing, or even do this in a smaller area. Now we're going to get slightly darker here, and I'm going to use the 3B pencil. Okay, now I'm just going to sharpen this a little bit, because not because it's blunt, but because I want a little bit more graphite exposed in the tip there. Okay, so, and I'm going to soften the tip so that I don't, when I do my first strokes, I don't get a sharp edge to the stroke. So I'm just going to soften or round the tip of that just a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to test it. How's this? Sometimes you need to just shape the graphite by holding it in one position, so that you get a soft, there you are, no edges on that. So now it's a soft edge to draw with. Okay, and you'll notice here that as I start layering this, already it's having an effect. So as you go up the line to softer pencils, of course, B is not as soft as 3B, and the softest of all our pencils today is the 12B. As you go up the numbers, as you increase the numbers, you need to apply less pressure to get the same tone that you had before. So be very, very delicate. Don't think that because you've got a softer pencil in your hand, you can suddenly press more firmly. You can't. You still have to be quite delicate, because remember, we're not going to take anything away. Now I'm just going to run this 3B pencil right up to the end and say that's where our black is going to be, right at this end. And notice what I'm doing is I'm kind of training myself already to get a progression. Now here it's much lighter, and here it's kind of all the same. That's okay, because now I'm going to move to the next pencil. So I've used B and 3B, and now I'm going to move to the next one, which is 6B. Now 3B to 6B is quite a big jump. So I'm going to start at the, again, I'm going to look at where's the softer edge of this pencil. Just shape that surface so that I can get, where is it? There you are. That's just rotate it until you get this lovely soft line. See that? There's no edges to it. It's just the same soft tone. Okay, so I'm going to start at the darker end, and I'm just going to start moving backwards and forwards. And again, I'm layering. This one, notice that I'm not using my fingers. My fingers are not touching the paper like I was with the B pencil. I don't need to put a brake on it. I can apply pressure just from my fingers, but I'm still not pressing very firmly. If I press firmly, just by comparison, I'll show you. Here's the pressure I'm applying now. If I press firmly, that's what I do. And I run the risk of getting this kind of streakiness in there. So I want to avoid that by gradually building up the pressure. Not too much. Now you can kind of get into an automatic rhythm here, and what you have to watch and be careful of is that you don't overdo it. So every now and then pause and have a look and say, am I getting a very smooth progression? Remember these kind of graphs, these maths graphs we did, and what we're aiming for is this straight line all the way from almost white to black. So this end here in our graph, this end here is very little graphite, and this end is a lot of graphite. This is very pale grey, this is very, very dark grey and black. And notice we want to get a very even progression. I don't want to get jumps or swoops. So we need to sit back every now and then and just check, am I still getting an even progression? Notice that I'm not going over this area at all, because I think this area is just fine. I may make some adjustments to it later. And now I'm going to go to here, the 9B. Again, test the pencil. See, it's a little bit streaky. So I need to find the edge that isn't, and maybe I need to sharpen this a little bit. Notice how the length of the graphite is a bit short. And it's much longer now, and it maybe will give me much, there you are. Okay, so now I'm going to try with this. And again, starting from the dark end, press a little bit firmer there, but then let the pressure off. Now, as it's a 9B, I really have to be careful about how far it goes, because a 9B is going to produce maybe a mid-grey, but nothing lighter. Nothing lighter than a middle grey. So I'm not going to let this pencil go any further than here. And if I need to make adjustments in this area again, I'll go back to the pencils that I was using before. I'll go back to my 3B and my 6B. So I'm just going to work with this pencil at this end. And you can imagine that when I get to the 12B will have an even more restricted territory. Now sit back and have a look, and am I getting an even progression? You know, this area here is pretty much all the same now, and what I'm getting is I'm going to need to create a little bit of a darker area there, and I'm going to go back to the 6B, check the surface I want to use, and I'm going to go into this area again and just kind of blend this bit with that bit, knowing that this part is still going to go darker. To be careful because I don't want to get that too dark. Okay, and now take the 9B again. Again, find the drawing edge. It's always good, even when you're doing a really good shading drawing, it's always good to have another piece of paper beside you that you can do these tests on, because you don't want to suddenly dive into your drawing with a new pencil and find that it's making the wrong marks for you. You want to make sure you know exactly what it's going to do for you. Now I've got a nice progression here, a little bit. Needs a little bit of adjustment there, I think. But I'm going to introduce 12B in a minute, because I need to now, what I need to do, I need to get my eye judging between the two extremes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work at the end here with the 12B. Before I finish the middle, I'm going to put the 12B in there and see if I can get the darkest tone possible. Again, I'm going to test it. Just make sure that okay, that's a good edge to use. Now, I am pressing fairly firmly, but I don't want to press so firmly that I get streakiness. So I'm pressing this firmly, which means I'm still using the principle of building up the shade in the tone by layers. So this area here is my darkest tone. Now remember I talked about the texture of the paper? I'm not pressing with the tip of the pencil, but the graphite is so soft it's actually filling in the texture of the paper without me pushing it in, because I'm not applying that kind of pressure. Would be like this, and I'm not doing that, and I'm not going to do that, because then I would change the texture of the tone. But it is still, with using this pressure and gradual layers, it is filling it up. Now, as a first practice, this is not bad. This area is feeling a little bit the same, and which means that it's a bit of a jump from there to there. And I'm going to pull, using the 9B, I'm going to pull a little bit more dark in here. It should not be, this should not be as dark as that. So a little bit more layer here and less there. More here and less there. Okay. So I'm looking at this and saying, how is that? Now, if you were able to achieve this kind of scale from dark to light with your first drill, I would say you were doing extraordinarily well. You might take 3 or 4 goes before you get to that stage, but it's worth doing it over and over again until you do, for the reasons that I said at the beginning. It will grow your confidence. It means that you will draw using shading and tone and color progressions if it's color pencils. You will draw with much more confidence and much more accuracy in terms of what you're trying to achieve. So there we are. This is our shading scale drill. Good luck.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click like and share it. If you want to see more short videos with art tips, art projects and lesson ideas, please subscribe to my channel, Rob the Art Teacher.